Hello everyone, welcome back. Just checking it's all working, I can see myself up there. Welcome back to TechShare Pro, day 3. We're looking at Practitioner Day today really. This is the day when we get our hands dirty on doing stuff, finding out what's going on under the bonnet, and drawing in a bit more tech probably. But it's also importantly a day for talking about leadership, and I think reflecting on the last couple of days, a big thing for us has been I think that people are listening to accessibility and understanding its importance in a new way. Maybe some of the messaging is getting through. The COVID stuff has been mentioned a lot as a shift in terms of people's attitude, a bit more empathy and understanding of why we're trying to sort of build systems that everybody can use. And so we've got a few themes. We've got a leadership session at the start, which I'm really looking forward to, talking about being the lone evangelist and what lies beyond. I think a lot of us have been in that position where we've been the single voice advocating for change, and there's a lot of change happening around us now, and we're moving into the next phase in lots of organizations, and a lot of maturity around accessibility in terms of how we go about it. So what does that look like? What happens next? What can we learn from the people who are further up that scale? And then this afternoon, we've got a session around journeys, accessible journeys, lots of different bits and bobs in there to do with all different ways of moving about, and maps, and a session around micro mobility from R&IB, and in parallel with that, a font session. What do we mean by accessible fonts? I think it might have the question in it, what is the most accessible font? But I'm fairly sure that that isn't a yes-no answer. But that will be fascinating, and some more practical sessions there. We're rounding up the day in terms of the main stage with a chat between Henrik from Toby, Alexander from Be My Eyes, and Emma from Emma Watch, talking about entrepreneurship and their individual work in terms of developing businesses that have inclusion at the heart of them, which is really interesting, sort of different perspective on what's going on around us. And then a panel, a leadership panel, a session with some people from all over the world actually, talking about accessibility, the state of accessibility today, and what might happen in 2021. So lots of stuff to get through. I'll come to my guests in a moment. I'm just looking at the time. But first of all, I just want to do a few housekeeping notes. So firstly, for those of you that haven't been here in the previous 2 days, we've done everything we can to make the event as accessible as possible. There are a few things which will work or won't work in certain settings, which we know about. If you get stuck, please let us know, and we have potentially got workarounds on some of them. But I'll just mention a couple of things. When you're in the main stage, which you are now, the stuff that's played out live as a stream, you'll get captions and BSL, and that's all part of the feed. If you're in stream 2 this afternoon, so this afternoon is the only time when there are 2 live sessions running in parallel in that way, that will be taking place within Teams. If you need to use captions at that point, we recommend that you download the desktop app and try and view the event within Teams, because that's where you can get the live captions. They don't work in the browser in the same way. So if you need captions, that's our top tip for those sessions. That's stream 2 this afternoon. The same goes for all the breakout sessions. I skipped over those, but we've got, I think, 9 other sessions running during the day that are happening at lunchtime and at 4 o'clock. So there's plenty to dip into there. They're happening in Teams sessions as well, and you will have control over the captions if you're using the desktop app. At lunchtime, one of those sessions is a well-being session. That's been really popular actually, so have a look for that in the schedule. We have also scheduled some breaks. Although it looks like a continuous stream in all of the programs and the various ways you see it, we have deliberately tried to find 5 and 10 minutes between sessions, and certainly a little while at lunchtime, 12:30 to 1. We don't have anything scheduled. So we do hope that you can find some time to take a break. It's also worth noting that you can pause everything that you're watching when it's live, so you can actually stop and start it if you do need to. All of the content is being recorded. All of yesterday and the day before's content is available in the schedule. If you go into the schedule tool and click on something previously you'll find that you'll join that session. It is the whole session, so if you're looking for a particular part of it, you're going to have to scroll through, but it's all there already. We will be downloading and sharing that video content. We'll obviously have quite a lot of it to do, so you probably won't see that until the new year. But all of that content will be shared afterwards, including slides and materials, and we'll try and turn the questions and answers into an FAQ for each of the sessions. So before I get any further, I'd rather than do this at the end, I'm just going to say thank you to a lot of people, because we've had an incredible 2 days already, and I'm really looking forward to today's program. But there's some people, if I mention this at the end of the day, you may not be around. So firstly, just want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors. Microsoft, Google, Sony, Barclays as our silver sponsors and headline sponsor, and the support of the other sponsors that's made this possible. They're participating in the event, they're supporting the event in lots of ways. I'm sitting on a chair and a desk provided by Posture People, for example. So thank you to everybody. It's a collective effort, and it's not just that they've turned up and put their badge on it. They've actually got a role to play in helping to build and grow the community. So we're really grateful for your support. And on the back of that, I'll mention the exhibition panels, where you can go into the exhibition booths and find out more about the various people who are exhibiting there. And it is actually interactive. You can go in there and chat, and there are various people who have got information to offer. So for example, you can go and find out more about Sony and the work that they're doing in the exhibition booths. So please do take a chance to browse through those. They're available within the Teams environment. The technical solutions team, I'm here in a studio just outside Brighton where I live. There's a group of people just the other side of that wall who have been pulling the whole thing together, and they're incredible, and everything's worked seamlessly. We've had one technical issue, which is to do with the sound. I think it's broadly to do because of the internet. Doesn't like the sound going the way that it's going around. We're aware of that, and we've done something to correct it, but the whole show has been great, and the support we've had from them is fantastic, so I just want to say thank you to them. And equally, Amanda and her team of the virtual conference manager that you've been using to go around this show, they've been great. We've got interpreters, they've been brilliant. That is not an easy task, and so we've been feeding them the pictures and the words, and then they've been joining in and then doing the interpreting, so that's great. Catherine and Sarah, you may have had contact with at Attendable. My AbilityNet colleagues, you're about to meet one. And then finally, you lot for turning up. We've had over 350, I think is the peak so far. We had 900 sign-ups. So there's plenty of you out there interested in what we're doing and growing the accessibility community, so thank you for joining us. So what I'm going to do next, I've got some guests here we're going to have a chat about today. If I could have my team's call up here, thank you. Good morning. How are you?
Hey.
Hi. So let me start with you, Robin. Can you say hello and tell us who you are?
Hi, I'm Robin Spinks. I work as Senior Innovation Manager at RNIB, the Royal National Institute of Blind People. I'm also the Vice Chair of Technology at the World Blind Union, so it's a real pleasure to be here at TechShare Pro 2020.
Brilliant, thank you. And Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Lowe. I'm the Service Delivery Director at AbilityNet. I'm lucky enough to lead some amazing teams at AbilityNet, our free services team that help people in their homes to get online, disabled and older people, and use and adapt digital to meet their needs, and our services to education and to the workplace. So all of those audiences have had quite a year, I think, of change. And I was just reflecting this morning and thinking, I'm just so glad all this happened in 2020 when we've got this technology that's allowed us to continue to support everyone, you know, in these strange times. So.
Thank you. And Hector, if nobody knows who you are yet, it's because they haven't been paying attention, frankly.
Yeah,
but tell us again what you do, apart from being co-architect of TechShare Pro.
Well, that's a promotion. Yeah, so I'm the Senior Tech Evangelist for Accessibility at Microsoft in Europe. I'm joining you from Oxford today. I'm actually wearing my Accessibility Ninja T-shirt.
Oh wow!
Which we give out to people who, you know, carry the flag for accessibility within Microsoft, and it has a rather nerdy ninja cat riding a dinosaur with a cane, which is one of our really nerdy, geeky Microsoft T-shirts. Unfortunately, they're all sold out.
Oh,
So actually, you know what I didn't do? I didn't do the description, the audio description. So I'm going to go back to me, and then we can go back around when I get to chat again. So I'm a mid-50s not balding, it's gone, white man wearing a black T-shirt. So Robin, I'm going to start with you. TechShare was something that you were working on as an IB for many years, and we started working together on TechShare Pro, well, 5 years ago, I guess, because it's 4 years since the first one. It's changed a lot, I think. I don't know what you would say was the big difference between TechShare Pro and where TechShare was originally. What were the big sort of differences for you now?
Well, I guess it goes back to the year.
Oh, can I get you to introduce yourself with your audio description?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm Robin. I am a 47-year-old white male with albinism, which is a hereditary condition, which makes me even whiter than a white person typically is. So that condition results in much less pigment in the skin, hair, and eyes, and it makes people look very pale. So they need to use sunburn. They need to use sun protection, to avoid sunburn. And everyone with albinism will have a visual impairment, typically one which will mean that they're registrable as visually impaired to some level. So just a useful bit of awareness. I am sitting in my garage, and I guess if we cast back to the year 2000, that's when a group of people came together in a room in Birmingham, and that was the first TechShare conference that happened. And it was really all about trying to get people to share experiences and share resources. I joined the organization in 2008, sorry. So I'd actually been to several TechShares before I joined RNIB. And then we built the event up as a kind of European flavoured event into TechShare Europe. And then we reached the point really in 2016. The intention always was to make it about partnership rather than make it about something that served RNIB. And that's when we're really lucky to be able to partner with our friends at AbilityNet and to really move the event onto its kind of next dimension of TechShare Pro. So bringing together lots of the elements of what we would have had in previous events, but also I think kind of sharpening the focus into something that would work well online. So a lot of people will be familiar with conferences where you submit papers and they go before a panel and it's quite academic. Conferences like CSUN, for example, we had that kind of format. And I think what happened is we've moved away from that and really become much more multifaceted. So it's great to see the event having a practitioner focus and having a kind of broader focus that would be of interest to policymakers and really just flourish in what I think is an era of accessibility coming alive. And I think, I say that in a sense that I think in the last few years, accessibility has come alive for all sorts of businesses who previously didn't consider it to be something that they needed to have an interest in. Now, what's great is the reasons to be interested in it are many and increasing. And people really see it as being much more part of good business sense. So, yeah, brilliant to see the event developing and really delighted to be part of it in 2020 using Teams.
Yeah, thank you. And Amy, the stuff we're doing with universities in the workplace, as you say, couldn't be more relevant now in terms of accessibility in particular. And so your session today is about maturity models, is that right?
That was yesterday.
That was yesterday.
Yeah.
Sorry, in my mind I was thinking, no, hang on a minute, that was yesterday. How did that go in that case? That's what I should have said.
It was great. Yeah, it was really good. We heard from Sean Norris at University of Westminster about how they use the higher and further education maturity model to formulate their accessibility roadmap. And they've got some really big ambitions and some really great senior leadership buy-in with the Vice Chancellor messaging around the topic. And it was really great to hear from them. And then we had a bit of an interactive session where people were evaluating their own institution on the basis of focus of effort, beyond the deadline for the accessibility regulations. And that was really interesting as well, to see the different stages that people are at on their journey. But, you know, the awareness within education has just changed completely. We used to talk predominantly to disability teams with a little bit of digital teams thrown in. And now we're hearing from, you know, marketing teams, admissions. It's just phenomenal, really.
And I'm sure you're seeing that as well, Hector. I'm guessing every part of Microsoft is, from the accessibility point of view, is incoming and outgoing. There are much more connections being made.
Yeah, I think Robin started off the theme here brilliantly. It's this idea that accessibility is not some IT nerdery. It's a design ethos. It's almost like a social value, isn't it? You know, that's what's really happening out there. And if you don't get your social values right, whichever part of your business that, you know, where this impacts, then, you know, there's risk, right? You know, there's reputational risk. There's legal risk. There's all sorts of things, and you know, the best way to avoid risk is to just go blasting through it to delight, isn't it? You know, to just create things that are just brilliantly designed, and that's what's come through the whole conference. Yeah.
Well, I think
there's no job role where you can't think about disability inclusion. That's the point now. Because you know, as we know, disability is everywhere around us. So you better know about it.
Yeah, and I think the working from home stuff that we had yesterday is a really good example of a way that's mainstreamed that question straight away in one go. Oh, I didn't realise you have that extra thing on your desk that you're meant to have at home as well. Whatever it was, you know, or how come I haven't got what they've got? I've seen them on Zoom and they've got on Teams or whatever. I've seen this stuff. I know they've got it. Why haven't I got it? That stuff is suddenly it's all there in front of me.
You're allowed to say Zoom.
Oh, no. Right. I know that. It's because we use Teams. So but I think that's where it's all sort of come to the surface, isn't it? I mean, and actually the Zoom thing is really interesting because, of course, that didn't exist in people's lexicon before. Teams did. Suddenly there's a word in the English language that people, you know, are using like a Google or a...
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I was thinking about this the other day, just while we're talking about video conferencing and Teams in particular. You know, I've found that in the past 6 months, I've actually participated in and spoken at more conferences than I did in the previous year.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about the fact that a lot of stuff's international and it requires travel, it kind of goes against what you'd expect, doesn't it? But, you know, what's happened for me is I've gone and spoken at conferences in Israel and the US and Australia, and I've done it just by using Teams and joining a link. And there's no budget required. There's no travel. So it's become easier to make a contribution more widely through remote working. And that's super exciting off the back of what Hector has just said, in a sense that, you know, I think for those of us that are kind of deeply evangelical about accessibility and inclusion, we're almost getting more of an opportunity to spread the gospel, as it were, through the use of these tools, because everyone's using them. We can drop in, we can jump into a conference program, and we can spread the word more widely, more easily, and in a more environmentally friendly way.
Actually, Amy, that makes me think as well about the stuff we do with DSA. You know, the Disabled Students Allowances that we've not been able to do remotely in the past, even though there's lots of accessibility benefits to not having to go into a centre and actually sit in a room. Clearly, in some cases, that is the best thing to do. But that shift has been dramatic for us in terms of services, hasn't it? That we're doing everything remotely. All of our assessments are coming in remotely. We're doing more of them than we were before. The capacity is there to do that because we haven't got to send somebody into a room to do it. Just, you know, simple, practical terms. And the students are getting what they want. They're used to working that way. They don't mind doing that at all. It's brought that down in one go.
Really positive, actually. And, you know, things like one student who was there with her dog, be able to bring a family member, feeling much more relaxed, because, you know, a lot of the time people come along for a needs assessment and they're a bit nervous. The travel, parking, all of those things going away. And, you know, as we've all discovered, online platforms give you the flexibility to go camera on, camera off, to take a break, go and have a stretch or whatever. So, yeah, I think it's been broadly, most people, we've been surveying them to say, would you prefer to have had your assessment in person if it wasn't for the pandemic. And I think it's well above 80% are saying they would have preferred online anyway.
Right.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And the thing that was preventing that before, I guess, is cultural sort of bureaucracy, really. I mean, the technology isn't an awful lot more complicated now than it was 10 years ago. For that one-to-one session, it works better, it's more convenient, people are more familiar with it. But that shift in people saying, no, you're not allowed to do that, it won't work as well, or clearly there are some obstacles, but it's shifted the other way. The 80 and the 20 has gone the other direction, I guess.
Well, it's amazing what you can do. I think that's the thing. It's the myth busting, isn't it? And, you know, I've spoken to assessors who've been walking up and down, demonstrating, pull along, carry bags and whatever else. Where there's a will, there's a way, really.
Yeah.
You'll be doing it via HoloLens soon.
Yeah, that would be cool.
So that's there's your prediction for 2021 then, Hector. So VR is going to happen. It is going to be in our homes. We are going to have it. We are going to wear headsets. We are going to be doing assessments on them.
Actually, I don't know. I honestly think the industrial or the workplace applications of that are so much more interesting than the ones. But that's just.
I came to the store opening actually, and the Microsoft store opening. That's the only time I've actually worn one. And the application was somebody doing some electrical work, and being shown within the building where the different elements were that they had to use. So they'd been given a 3D version of the building, and they were sharing that through the HoloLens, so you could actually see which parts of the building they need to go to. Now that's a really simple but really powerful explanation of, no, you're not. Don't pull the red one, pull the blue one. It was that sort of thing. So,
interestingly, just to talk about how disability drives innovation as well. Within the HoloLens, you've got the 3D audio that John L was talking about yesterday for Soundscape, and you've got the eye tracking that you're going to be talking about with Henrik this evening. There's now eye tracking inside HoloLens as well, so that as you read, the words auto scroll as your eyes track. So it's just another example where even the technology that's emerging now is deeply influenced by focusing on disability inclusion. It's always been this way, but it just continues, doesn't it?
Well, I think and that's a good preview as well for the because I joined the conversation with Henrik and Alexander and Emma to talk about the pre-conversation about today, and they didn't invent that as a disability feature. It went round another loop. It became something that people with disabilities were using, and now it's coming back into the mainstream. It's just an interesting shift in terms of how you do that innovation, how it grows, how it becomes part of the mainstream.
I spent 10 years working for Toby, just to be transparent. But honestly, Henrik is amazing, and actually, I don't think he's spoken at a disability event for years.
Right.
So, but that's the idea that he's the one that oversees the disability side and the mainstream vision for eye tracking. I think that's going to be a great session.
Yeah.
Really do.
Yeah, and also Emma is fantastic. You introduced us to Emma as well. She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So no, well, I'm going to leave it there. We've got to stop for 5 minutes while we switch over the change channel from ITV to BBC. And then we'll be back in at 11 o'clock for the leadership sessions. I know you're going to be part of that, Hector, and Robin, your session later on. And thanks, Amy, for joining us. And we'll see you all soon. Have a good day.
Great day.
Thanks, guys.
So thank you for the panel there. As I say, we're going to take a short break now while we move the cables around and plug the other bits in, and we'll see you at 11 o'clock. Take care. Hi everybody, welcome back to TechShare Pro, our main session for today to kick us off, which is all about accessibility leadership and culture change in organisations. The bigger title being Beyond the Lone Evangelist, what do we do to move on and embed accessibility into organisations and change the way they work, and get our teams lined up behind the inclusive design sort of practices that we're advocating. I will just briefly summarise a couple of accessibility issues in case you're just joining now. So you shouldn't have any accessibility issues, we hope. You should be able to get in and move around the conference and view and engage in the discussion through networking and so on. But if you do need to use live captions and you are in the browser, then when you're in particular sessions, you may need to be using the Teams app instead, the desktop app. We've noticed that that's an issue for some. But apart from that, you should be able to hopefully see the BSL and the text captions for the main sessions, and in workshops you should be able to switch on the live captioning, which is part of Teams. So we're going to start off with a chat. I'm going to have a conversation with Gareth Ford-Williams in a second from BBC, and then we're going to move on to a panel which is Beyond the Lone Evangelist, and that's going to be chaired by Hector from Microsoft, with Charlie from BBC, Heather from Skyscanner, and Andy from the Department for Education. And then an exciting session at 12. We've got a chance to catch up with Christina Mallon and Rama Giroa from the RCA and Wunderman Thompson, respectively. So lots of stuff today is already about us, the community, and what we're doing to sort of grow our influence. So if I can say hello to Gareth, we can get started. Hey, Gareth, how are you?
Hi, Mark. You're right.
So
how are you doing?
I'm not too bad at all. Can you do the audio description intro? I would get that one out of the way, and you'll describe to people who you are and what you look like.
So yeah, I'm Gareth Ford-Williams. I'm one of the heads of UX design, responsibility for accessibility at the BBC. Been there 15 years. Well, in this role in 15 years, I joined to make TV trails, and like so many other people, that you end up in accessibility because you end up having conversations about it. 50 something, yeah, white, balding northerner with 2001 t-shirt.
So,
sat like probably most other people in a bedroom.
So I just want to check in on the balding. At what point do you and I become bald and not balding?
I think
where's that line?
between us, we could probably muster up a full head of hair.
Okay, maybe
at a push.
So the reason we're kicking off with this conversation, I think, is because certainly in terms of the work you've done in the BBC over that 15 years, obviously not all in that one part, but I think that what we're trying to do in this session this morning is talk about how change happens within big organisations. Obviously, lots of people in the conference will be from smaller organisations and have lots of different challenges in a day-to-day basis in terms of shifting the dial on accessibility. But if we take the top level view, how would you describe the shift over the last few years in the BBC in terms of accessibility? Where would you say you are in terms of a journey?
It's one of those. I think there's a little bit of thing about accessibility. There's a fair amount of questing and holy grail about it because things continuously change. You know, I always say my life would be really, really easy if people stopped inventing things, and that's this whole thing. It's a progressive area to work in, and you constantly are asking questions and trying to find interesting answers to really curious problems, and it's all about people. But I think I kind of slightly privileged with the BBC because I used to make TV trails up to about 2004, and but the BBC's got a massively long history of accessibility anyway, with its first InVision signing. And our signer here, they did that first time in 1957 for the news. They did a news program at the weekend, News for the Deaf, and that's started and first closed caption service in the world in the 1970s with our CFAX captions, and it's always thought about, it's trying to reach as many people because it's in its charter. And when I kind of raised the question 15 years ago with a chap called Tony Aggie, who was the controller of bbc.co.uk, and my boss, who is Tim Davey, who's curiously in the last couple of months has just become the Director General, it was like, why aren't we doing this? We should be doing this. And and there were pockets of bits and pieces. There was a chap called Ian Hamilton that was doing some children's games in CBBS for Switch users, and there were bits and pieces, but there was no consolidated effort. And by that time already, it was a huge scale. And that is one of the kind of the things that we're always tackling about is scale and complexity and diversity of audience, and constantly and trying to make this scale. I think the conversation's always moving on. Jamie's talked about the stuff that we've done in VR, and there's a wider, sort of XR output of it. And, Jamie did that project because we couldn't find any reliable data about the barriers in VR. And so we need to know that. We can't start creating solutions until we know what the questions are.
Yeah.
And so it's this constant thing. And so this, we're never going to crack the problem, but we're constantly tackling it, and we're constantly thinking about it. And I found this, you asked me this, I ended up getting a little bit sentimental and started thinking back 15 years about where we came from, and then realized that was actually a really bad idea, because it could have went, oh no, stress. That's awful. And that was my first point of contact with AbilityNet, as that was the time I met this chap. I was told to go and meet this chap called Robin Christopherson, and we invited Robin in. We did the first session, workshop session on accessibility, 2005 with Robin. And I think then I think Robin's a bit of a sci-fi nerd. I think we went off into Television Centre and found a TARDIS afterwards, a real one. High point of the day. But it was, it's a constant challenge, and various things. I mean, we've made so many mistakes, but there was no precedent for lots of the stuff that we've been trying. And I think the BBC started out as a research and development company. It created a radio network, because there was no such thing as a radio network, to then become a corporation to put programs on. And so we had this kind of R&D approach. It kind of sat within the kind of the ethos, the ethics, the culture of the organization is to experiment. And we made a lot of mistakes in 15 years, and we've done some good things, and we're continuing in the same vein, really. So
just the starting bit, I'm thinking about how we're placing this for people. I think what we're seeing in TechShare Pro and around us in the communities that we're both part of is there's obviously a groundswell of interest in accessibility in the broader sense. There's the core accessibility evangelists, if you like, who probably recognise each other to some extent from the sorts of events they go to, the sorts of things that catch their eye. There's the champions. We'll come to champions in a minute, because you've been doing a lot of work around that, the growing network. And then there's the allies, the people who sort of get what you're talking about, just want to know how they can help. But there's a stage in everybody's journey, I guess, around that initial empathy. That's what made me think about Robin's role in there. Presumably there's a point when everybody has to go, okay, I get why I'm doing this now, sort of understand its purpose or something. Does that still remain? Do we still need to keep showing people, somebody using voiceover, Addy does that, Robin explaining the power of the technology in his life. Do we still need to keep telling those stories? Do you think that's a powerful part of it?
We do, and I think there's a lot of it is actually to blame. You can blame the education system. Right. I think really quite considerably in the 1970s and 60s and 80s. There was segregation of children, and there weren't disabled kids in mainstream schools until I think we just started having VI kids just as I was coming towards the end of school in the late 1980s, and so people grew up without knowing people, and that's a big problem, and it's getting people to just go, right, it's just people, and we have a different way of interfacing with the world, and we have different needs and different requirements, and if you separate people out, empathy is hard. And now people, it's great. I mean, the BBC's got about 8+, I can't remember the actual percentage of members of staff. It's trying to get to 12% members of staff with disabilities at the minute. There's a huge push. And it's really, really important. It's really important that we're all in the same spaces and we're all together and we all understand each other. Because then there doesn't become any problem, around empathy. We all understand exactly. And it's kind of, I'm finding younger generations are having a lot less of a problem with it than our generation, who struggle a little bit. They get it, we're fine. And I suppose when we got to the exec, though, I think it was an interesting one going back 15 years when we got to the exec. Actually, the question was, why the hell aren't we doing this? No one wanted to know why we should be doing it. They wanted to know why it wasn't happening already.
Right.
Which became a massive problem because everyone became a huge enthusiast, and then we had to deal with it all.
Countless requests to do stuff.
Fix it all now, and
Yeah,
it's like, no, that's not possible. But we can start pulling things together.
I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting in the sense that one of the bits that people watching may pick out from this, I think, and it happened in a couple of other sessions we've talked about, and I know it's going to come out later, is the idea that you can actually go and talk to people at the top. You don't have to go necessarily via all the established routes, and that there's a case to be made here which is pretty straightforward, that people with any with an open door should be listening to, at the top, whatever the top means, whoever that is.
Yeah.
Certainly, we were bowled over on Tuesday having someone like Cindy Rose from Microsoft, Mark Reed from WPP, Lena from Unilever. They're saying that we want to do this. It is established now that that's the thing to do. So you can imagine somebody, gritting their teeth and getting into the chief executive officer and saying, look, I think this is a really important thing, we should do it. Is the gap actually somewhere in between the two? It's the day-to-day practice. How do you shift? Because that's a slow process, isn't it? You can change the mind of the CEO tomorrow, like you say, and they come back with a long list of things they want you to do, and then you turn to the team that's meant to be doing it, and they're saying, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't know how to do it, even if they're as motivated as they could be. But I think that stuff you've been tackling in the BBC is changing the way you do things rather than just winning the case is the next step, isn't it?
It's building that case and building something that is easy, understandable, and scalable and sustainable. And you don't want to end up in, sort of what's the best way of describing it? Auditing sausage machine, I think is, it's not about compliance, it's about people. And you need to bring that in. And one of the first things I did is got permission to send out a division wide, and we all used to be pretty much in White City in those days. We're spread out all over the country now, but send out a division wide email and just say, look, I'm going to be in the boardroom this one lunchtime with a load of sandwiches and tea, and with no friends. And so you can either come and talk to me because you feel sorry for me, or if you're interested in accessibility, I'd love to have a chat. And it was packed. It was absolutely hammered. We couldn't fit everyone in the room, and it wasn't just the sandwiches, because BBC sandwiches aren't that great. But the people turned up. They wanted to know about it, and this became that first network. And in that network, I went to them and said, "Okay, I need to understand how you do your job, and I need to make sure that this works for you. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. I'm not going to slap a load of guidelines in front of you and thou shalt not in cross stitch over the bed. It's none of that. It was just, I have to use, as an accessibility manager, I had to understand how to integrate something along the lines of guidelines, which frankly are quite unusable. They're very, very hard to use, but it's find a way of integrating those in and doing it gradually and playing a really long game with it. I think of that group, the first thing we did was to create subgroups to tackle each of the different questions that we were raising within the group. And the first thing we looked at was semantic structure, and we got a big group of people across all the teams together, and we all decided how many heading level 1s we were going to have. Because we couldn't find any pages that were marked up the same. So we just tackled one problem. We did it slowly and gradually. The business treats headings exactly the same everywhere now, and no one really knows why. And that's because we sorted it out 15 years ago, and it just became the way that we did it.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's that trick, is turning accessibility into not building things and making them accessible, but building accessible things, because that's the way we do it.
Yeah.
And it takes time, and you have to listen. You have to be a good listener to be an accessibility person. And seek forgiveness, not approval. Just go and knock on the CEO's door and have a chat. Find out when they get in the lift, pop in with them and have a natter. Do that, be cheeky. No one's going to have a go at you for talking about something that's, very important, very ethical, and really, in some ways shouldn't be discussed at that, about why we should do it. It just should be done.
Just picking up on one thing, then I know that you worked on the iPlayer.
That's where it all started.
I was wondering whether if I was sitting inside an organisation, maybe not as big as the BBC, but maybe more typical, particularly if it's a digital company, for example, with lots of products around it? Is it good to pick a project to go at? Is that a top tip that you would, if you were mentoring somebody, say pick something that people are going to see the change in it, rather than try and spread it thinly across everything? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
with that?
that's kind of where it went. So Tony Aggie, who was the controller of .co.uk at the time, and he just said to me, look, we've got this project over here. It wasn't called iPlayer in those days, and it was a prototype called BBC Imp. And he said, we're trying to build a thing. And it's still fine. He said, just get in there, write a bunch of requirements, and I'll mandate them up front. We're just going to experiment. We don't even know if this is going to happen, and let's find a place. Let's find out how it works, test it, make sure it works, and then spread it. And then we've got a place where we can say, look, it's working over here. Here's how we did it. It's quite simple. Here's some documentation that will help you, build bits and pieces, and you spread it out from there. And we ended up building a small team off the back of it. Lucy Policino, Andrew Strachan, and Kevin Carey, who was before he became chairman of the RNIB, he was actually an engineer on that team.
Yeah.
And so we built it, and it became part of iPlayer's culture, and it stayed. There's no accessibility. There's actually an accessibility lead in iPlayer, but it just became part of the thing that's what iPlayer is to be as accessible as it possibly can. And then that just kind of spread out. We just learned it, and it became a nice place to experiment. But bear in mind, already by then, BBC had millions of web pages. It was huge already by 2005. It's now absolutely ridiculous size, but it was. It's that kind of thing. You can't try and go for everything. It's not possible.
Yeah. Well, I think so.
Or prove me wrong. There's the challenge.
I'm going to draw us to close. I think that the thing that I think that's a really good place to stop, because the next bit we're going to hear from, of course, is Charlie picking up a role within the BBC about champions. I don't actually know how far back the story goes from the point of view of BBC and that champions thing. You mentioned that initial session at White City with people joining in. At what point did it formalise? At what point did you feel it became necessary to put a label or a name on it? I mean, is it in people's job descriptions and so on?
It was just groups. It was just an accessibility group, and it became. We looked at different things. It was like interest groups within the BBC, and people volunteered their time, and they just wanted to sort it out, and it kind of evolved out that idea. And then I think somewhere around about 2011, 2012, we were chatting with someone who just said, there's champions networks in places like Yahoo, but there was no such thing as an accessibility champions network out there, and we kind of formalized it off that.
Right. The
groups had kind of settled down by then, and they weren't really active, and we got on top of stuff, and we were building the mobile accessibility guidelines. There was 2012 Olympics being done at the time, and that's where we ended up with one chap who approached us and just said, I want to know everything, who had been in part of those original groups and part of those HTML, and he just wanted to know even more. And Henny Swan, who was a part of the team at the time, teamed up with him, and it's called Al Duggan, and he became kind of like our first official champion by name, and then it just grew, and it's still trying to find it. In some ways, the successes, the failures, it's still trying to find its feet and trying to understand what a network should be, which is what I'm not going to talk about, what Charlie's going to talk about.
Yeah.
But it kind of, it's always been there, but officially about 8 years.
Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting, particularly as a link into the next thing, because I think certainly my impression, maybe a couple of years when I first came across the idea, was that there was a fixed model of some kind for a Champions Network. it's quite clear there isn't, and I don't think it's meant as entirely as a compliment that you've been making it up as you go along the whole time, and I think that's probably the best point to finish the conversation.
Don't tell anyone.
No, I haven't. Honestly, I've not mentioned that to anybody at all. Gareth, it's fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
and also for all the amazing work that you've been doing, and inspiring us all along the way. So thank you.
It's all to do with everyone else. I'm just the person that tries to give some shape to it. There's an army of people.
You've got a particularly good way of doing it. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
See you.
So as trailed in that conversation, we're going to move into the panel. I think Hector's going to join me. Hector's chairing this session, if he's ready. He is. Great. Hi, Hector.
Hey, Mike.
I mean, you'll know that Gareth is playing down his role there as a sort of as the evangelist, and you're in a similar role. I think this session's all about hearing how people are actually trying to grow that connection inside their organisation, and not just about technology. So I'm really looking forward to this. I'll hand over now. We'll get cracking on. You've got 40 minutes to try and solve the problems. I'll leave you to it.
We'll definitely fill the time. I'm pretty sure about that. So welcome to this session on Beyond Alone Evangelism. Accessibility is one of those topics that really has huge reach across any organisation. And my role at Microsoft is actually driving this out across Europe, Middle East, Africa, across different countries. And I can honestly tell you there is no one size fits all for getting buy-in to this agenda. Some people really take it down the kind of very much the human element. Others take it down the technical discipline side of things. Other people are thinking about things like building strength in partner networks and changing the industry. Yep, we know that there is no one model, but this morning I'm joined by three amazing panelists and people I've got to know specifically in the rehearsals for this. And Andy, I think you and I have known each other for quite a few years now. You all have very different jobs, yeah? And so I just thought it'd be useful for us, first of all, just to go around and for you to just explain to people, let's get our audio description in as well, but just explain to people what your actual job is, how you describe it. How you tell your family what you do is always what I say is a good way to, do that. And then also maybe what personality trait you have that maybe suits you to the role of really driving this agenda forward in your organisation. So I'm going to go to you first, Andy.
Thanks, Hector. I'm a white male with dark rimmed glasses with, I want to say brown, but I'd say brown and greying hair. I've made the mistake of wearing a salmon pink shirt today. I took the style advice from one of the speakers last night about doing my colours. I would have normally worn a t-shirt. And I'm sitting with a white background behind me in a room with a headset on. My job role, that's an interesting one. I'm business engagement and the accessibility manager at Department for Education. I deal with all the stuff internally around supporting our staff with workplace adjustments to be the best they can be at work. I'm also involved with smarter working, and I'm also a bit of evangelist about making the department's internal systems accessible by default. I don't want anything special. I just want things to be vanilla so it works for everyone as a starting point. I don't want accessibility as an afterthought. Got a question about how I got into this space. Lord knows how I got here, really. I've got a background in tech. I'm a geographer at heart. I'm a bit of an outdoors person, but I'm also just passionate about inclusion, really. That's how I got here. And I've done a variety of roles in tech and out of tech. I also was asked about personality trait, and I asked my team about it, and they came up with some very nice things like compassionate and caring, but they also said exhausting and Tigger-like, and I'll take the Tigger-like. I've got slightly boundless enthusiasm, and I'm sorry, I don't have an off switch.
I think we share that. I'm going to say, it's like high energy is probably one of the prerequisites to get involved in this topic because it can be exhausting at times. We'll get onto that in a moment. Heather, could you maybe introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Hepburn. I'm the accessibility lead at Skyscanner. Audio description, I'm quite tall. I've got long, straight blonde hair, blue eyes, black top and black rimmed glasses. I'm sitting in my home office in actually sunny today, sunny south side of Glasgow. And yeah, I'll just briefly about Skyscanner, just in case people don't know what it is. A digital travel company founded back in 2003 in Edinburgh, tech startup. We now have in normal times, we have over 100 million travellers every month finding and booking travel on our website and apps. So yeah, how I got here is quite odd, I guess. I've been at Skyscanner for 2 years, and I actually started as a UX writer. So I was writing the copy on the website and the app, and it was actually during my interview process for the role, I was asked to do a UX critique of our app or part of our app. And actually all of the issues that I found, really surprisingly, were accessibility issues. I surprised myself because I didn't actually realize I knew what I knew. I'd come from RBS, we'd worked and we'd built accessible products along the way. I was just kind of inbuilt there. So I was really surprised. So when I started as a UX writer, I was like, right, what can I do here to help? This doesn't feel quite right. Joined the Accessibility Guild. There was one on Slack, a Slack group. did the hi, how are you, you know, can I help? And there wasn't actually much going on. There had been in the past, there'd been a few pushes to do things, but it just hadn't quite stuck. So I kind of got everyone together. We had our very first meetup in March last year, and it's just kind of snowballed from there. So I transitioned from that UX role into this wonderful role, doing accessibility full time. I'm the only person in the organisation in a permanent role in this, so yeah, it's pretty much just me. But the personality trait, exactly what you're saying, but also I think persistent to the point of annoying, but really trying to pull back before you get that, you know, before you become really annoying.
That's just different words for Tigger-like, though, right?
Yeah.
One thing you said in the rehearsal that I'm just going to make sure everybody hears is you said, Skyscanner are cool. Why are we not doing enough accessibility? And I love that. So maybe that's also with the personality trait you need to start thinking about, is like telling people you're quite cool. Yeah, you know, you want to be cool. All right, so Charlie, over to you.
So, hi, I'm Charlie Turrell. I work for the BBC. I'm a white woman with quite dark hair and a black t-shirt and a quite sad-looking, undecorated Christmas tree in the background of a white room. I am the change manager for the BBC, and I look after the Accessibility Champs Network. I joined the BBC about, feels like forever, but it was actually only probably 3 years ago. And I've been looking after the Champions Network since the beginning of this year. So I kind of took over and I've been looking about how it's structured and how we can change it and how we can improve it. And I'd say some of my personality traits, I like people and I like understanding people and what motivates them and how we can get people thinking about things in a different way and their learning styles and understanding them. I think so. Having a group of 220 people that have all got different motivations to join the network and to kind of include accessibility in their work was fascinating to me. And Gareth kind of mentioned the network when I joined the BBC and then lured me slowly into the role because he thought that, I think he originally was like, you'd be good at this. And I thought, oh, it's a completely different world. I didn't know. And all of a sudden there I am working in the accessibility team, which was great. But I think it's that curiosity of people and learning and understanding different ways of working. I think for me, that's something that's a constant thing that I enjoy. So being part of this network and part of this group, I think is you know, it works quite well for me, really.
So we've got a real spread there, right? We've got techie workplace adjustment. That's how I'm going to describe you, Andy. You know, it's definitely interested in like that desktop experience. Heather, UX. Charlie, you know, people, culture change. You know, I'm wondering whether most people who are watching this now have got that kind of role within their organization. Somebody who's really focused on driving culture change. I know this in Microsoft is a huge thing. You know, it's like as we move from, you know, previous CEOs to under Satya Nadella's kind of a tenure of the company, it's like culture. It's all about culture and changing that approach as we engage with our customers. So I'm going to come straight back to you because you don't get culture change unless you scale. Yeah. But the kind of the whole point of this session is to really talk about scale, wider awareness, building almost like fandom within your organization for what you're trying to do, getting buy-in. Can you maybe help us understand what are some of the kind of the critical components to building that scale as you build your project out?
Yeah, I think it's odd. I think Gareth was the original lone evangelist and kind of, you know, lured people in a room with the promise of a beer and a sandwich and to talk about accessibility. And I think it realistically is, it's about finding your friends quite quickly, finding the environment that you can have those discussions with people. And I think that's really key to building that momentum, having those conversations of how can we work this and how can we, you know, get senior leadership to buy into this and how can we structure what we want to do and what learning and resources are there. I think having those conversations is really key. I also think that having the right mindset is what helps the scale and the momentum continue. So, you know, the accessibility champs in our world, they're the voice of the user in every sprint. So they talk, whenever they're talking about design or building anything, it's the user that they have at the forefront, and that's what we try and instill constantly into the champs. It is about training, it's about learning, but the mindset for us is what keeps the momentum going. It keeps the conversation happening. It, you know, that conversation even spreads wider than the champs. And, you know, you're in a sprint and you're having a conversation and someone puts their hand up and says, you know, have we thought about accessibility? Have we thought about who we're going to exclude? Have we thought about our parameters? And are we going back to that, you know, not drifting and actually coming back to it constantly and saying, are we still, you know, on the right path? It's the conversation, I think, that helps. And I think that's what drives the momentum in the wider organization as well. The conversations start, you know, you start linking up with diversity and inclusion groups because, you know, you've gone that way and everyone's going, oh yeah, you know, we're thinking about that as well, and we didn't think about accessibility. Now we can have that conversation for our staff and, you know, for procurement and for the way that we, you know, we hire people. And so that conversation just grows. And I think it is just about making sure that we all have that mindset right at the very beginning. I think for us as well, like executive sponsorship is helpful in an organization, but for us it's really different because it's in the charter for the BBC. It's law. It's what we have to do. You know, we have to represent X amount of the population, and making sure that we're like, you know, everybody's a license fee payer. So we've got to make sure that everybody gets the same amount out of what we deliver. And so the exec sponsorship is key, but it's what helps us drive things, because everybody goes, well, it's policy, you know, and those policies create guidelines, and those guidelines then need resources. And so that just, I think that continues, but having that in any organization, I think, is definitely really helpful.
Yeah, so is policy enough?
I think policy is a good start. I think it helps people have that backing. So if you're working on something, having that policy to refer back to helps everyone go, well, yeah, you know, we're designing this in a certain way because we're doing it for this reason. You know, the policy is just a start. I think it's that policy's there as a background, as a something to keep pushing you. And then once you've got that, those policies do feed into creating very specific guidelines or having those conversations. And then those guidelines that help you with whatever work you're doing, but it helps get people on board as you go. Having that policy to back you up, I think, was really helpful.
Yeah. So Heather, maybe if I could come to you next. But so you know, something like the BBC has it in the charter, is very much viewed as kind of almost like a public service. You know, we're all contributors to it. It's a very different situation where you are, not least just in terms of scale, right? You know, and buy-in. But you still have to do the same job. You still have to get people along with you. What role does policy play within Skyscanner? Or are you mainly more going for this kind of, you know, it's the right thing to do, it's the cool thing to do, you know, we need to be cool?
So yeah, we're not governed by many regulations, so it's much more of a choice at the moment, and that I'm sure will change down the track. But it's something that are so, I mean, the business case is huge and varied and long, and there's so many great reasons to do accessibility. And I'm pleased to say that, you know, we feel that we're now beyond that at Skyscanner. The program has only been running for, I don't know, maybe a year or so. Our first meetup, as I said, was last March. Things started to grow from there. So the momentum started to really build. And it's just, people have just got on board with it. So we have a wonderful set of accessibility champions. We work with a strategy it's a really simple strategy, but it was kind of borrowed from Sam from Verizon, who spoke last year at this. She talked about raising awareness, increasing adoption, and improving advocacy, and continuing to do those things. So I guess just to let you know a few practical things that we've done. The raising awareness thing, we at the very beginning, we ran a few empathy labs that were so successful. So we ran them across 3 different offices, and we got staff to come in and sit down, and we simulated different disabilities, and we set tasks to the staff to, you know, go book a flight from here to here, or go and find a hotel that's 2 kilometers from the city centre. Tasks using our website or app, but with a simulated disability. And honestly, it was like within minutes, if not seconds, the realization of, oh, right, this is actually quite hard, or this is broken, or that just made people get on board so quickly. It was so worthwhile. And from that point, I guess we've been, you know, building on that. We've got an accessibility hub now on Confluence that's full of information and guides on how to do this thing in different roles. And we've started doing training across loads of different teams. So we've got design teams, content teams, development teams, product managers. You know, we're trying to reach everybody, and that's going well. But so that's helped the scaling element. But what the biggest win, I think, for us, and this just happened a couple of weeks ago in terms of scaling, we got the word accessible into the strategy, and it's one word, and it's part of the customer experience and everything. But that one word is just going to be life-changing for us. You know, we can have conversations in areas that we couldn't have had before. We can really push the training in all sorts of ways. It's absolutely brilliant. We can start people actually building this into proper processes that are going to stick. So, you know, this is just new, but in the last couple of weeks, I've had great conversations about, okay, what can we do here? So super exciting.
There's so much in your answer that I want to pick up on. But you know, there's elements of readiness and training, and that actually feeds into what Charlie was saying about one of the cultural elements we're always trying to build is that culture of lifelong learning. You know, that you're never done. You know, that's definitely a cultural piece. But then there's the measuring. You know, actually measuring the impact you're having, and I think, you know, as we're trying to kind of build a global scale on accessibility at Microsoft, that measurement is a critical component. You've got to be able to show management the progress you're making on that agenda. And you know, in terms of the employee experience, I mean, obviously you do a lot of work with employees with disabilities within the DFE. But when we listen to Heather talking here, there's that kind of, it's the product focus that's all there, right? How do we get that kind of that lived experience of a disability in an organization to be one of those factors that influence the product that you're creating?
Quite an interesting one, Hector. We've done a load of work around getting basically different voices heard in the organization. So we've basically, with our neurodiversity groups and our Department of Disability group, we've basically picked off SLT. Let's be honest about it. We've gone around the various groups, operations, and we've actually said we want some space in your management committees or whatever. And we've come along and we've basically gone through our neurodiversity and disability action plan. And we're actually saying, this is it. What 3 things are you going to offer us? Not things that we're going to, you know, that we're going to, please, can we have? This is things you're going to offer us, things you're going to do. The other thing that I think that I've done, as a lone evangelist, I'm not really a lone evangelist, really. I've just found 3 or 4 people hidden in the organisation that have been working away for years, one of which is my colleague, Jane Dickinson, and Charlotte's a fast streamer who's on this on TechShare Pro today, and Nick Jarvis Smith for me. I've just put together a small team, and it is only 4 of us. We basically have reached out into our tech directorate and then operations group, because we keep the lights on, we keep people working, and basically found people and found our allies really, and worked really hard at that. And we've got a real strap line which Jane Dickinson came up with, which is aiming to be accessible by default. So we've made a big leverage. We're an Office 365 user, a big Teams user, and we've basically turned around to our colleagues supporting us saying, we want all the accessibility features turned on by default. Don't turn anything off. And if you're going to turn something off because it's a security risk, come and tell us why you're doing it, and we'll have an argument about it. Sound a bit aggressive? I don't argue. I'm really a nice guy, Hector, but you know what I mean? It is that point, really. And I think it's one of the things that's helped us internally is legislation. We've got the public sector web accessibility guidelines coming in for internal tools for us as an organisation. That's helped us have a leverage with procurement and also with people that are bringing in systems like HR systems, travel booking systems. We're not perfect, absolutely not. But the fact is we're on a journey like everybody else is. And I think being on a journey, as a lone evangelist, you can't go on a long journey on your own. I think the phrase is, if you want to go fast, travel alone. If you want to go far, travel together. Bit of a cliche, but I think it's definitely the way forward. And I get the feeling just generally, I've got a bad Twitter habit, as you know, just looking at organizations. There's loads of people on that organizational journey that are just massing together over a whole variety of forums and just building progress, really. I think it's a great time actually to be in accessibility, actually.
I think your involvement with your employee resource groups, and I think also that reach you're having out across government to link in with other employee resource groups across the civil service, there's something I think within most organizations that's been interesting for me, that when they realize it's also about their employees and not just, this design for this group of others in the outside world, when they recognize the disability representation have within their own organization, that's an incredibly important lever to pull, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And I would say, I'm not going to talk about a COVID bonus. It's a phrase I absolutely hate. But one of the things about us all working remotely is talk to your colleagues that have got some access needs and about how their remote experience is. Some of them have been, terrible. It's been very difficult. But for some of them, say, welcome to our world. Things are hard when you don't have access to all the resources you need. And actually, we are getting better access to some resources. Now we're working remotely than we do in the office. So that's live captions, that's transcripts, that's high quality video. And I think it's just, I think that's a really important one. And I'm massively passionate about nicking other people's ideas, being a neurodiverse magpie, squirreler of ideas. I'm willing to borrow somebody else's ideas, give them credit and use it really. And we've reached out, and one of the things I've been involved with, as you know, I'm a co-founder of the M365 Accessibility Network across government, looking at how we use the tools in Office 365, to best effect. And I think that secret is find your allies internally, but also find your allies externally, because what I've discovered, and I've discovered it, my team will say this very strongly, I try and get other people to speak for me because people are fed up of hearing my voice, really. So if you get people from externally to come in and speak, or you can get people internally to deliver your messages or your group's messages, that's really powerful.
That's a brilliant segue into my next question, which is, there is so much out there. How do we coordinate the voice of, or the influence of external organizations and bring them into your own organization? Charlie, you've been doing some amazing work, like really proactively reaching out to build that community of evangelists. Could you share some of that experience?
Do you know what? It was something that came about in the middle of a conversation between me and Gareth, and I said, it's great, the stuff that we're doing internally and the network that we've created. And I sometimes I wanted somebody to ask a question to and kind of go, I've noticed engagement is different now, and how can I encourage people to think about this in a different way? Or, why is not everybody coming to a webinar that I set up? And I realized I was the only one that was doing my job in my organization. And I thought, you know what? I wonder if somebody else wants to join a little 5-person working group where we can all discuss things and we can, chat about what's not working, have a bit of a whinge about things that are really difficult. And I said it in the middle of a conference I did for accessibility in Manchester, and the influx of people that went, me as well, and I didn't realize that I wasn't alone in this particular journey. And so, we've got 120 confirmed organizations that have wanted to join this external group, which is so encouraging and really exciting, because we've now got a whole group of people, and the network should kind of start kicking off in the new year, but a whole group of people that are desperate to have that conversation, who want to go, I've started a network and I don't quite know how to get more people involved, or I don't know how to get senior leadership buy-in, and I don't know, or even go, we've got this really cool resource and I want to share it with everybody else. I think that having those resources and sharing ideas is something that maybe the BBC hasn't always done. I found that we tend to churn ideas internally a little bit and not always look at outside. And I think we're just missing that fresh idea, that kind of revolutionary thing, or even just sharing what we're doing and going, this is kind of cool. We've created this thing and we really want to share it with you guys. So for me, to have this network is just, it's so exciting. And it's going to be fun to speak to different people.
And then Heather, obviously coming back to you, when you see the BBC doing something like that and then offering to share everything they're doing, I mean, I guess that comes back to your first experiences of TechShare Pro last year. It's that idea that, in smaller organizations, you might not have a workplace adjustment team, or a conformance team or a standards team. So actually being able to tap into some of those larger organizations is hugely helpful.
Oh, so good. And actually, we're one of the companies on Charlie's list of 120. And when I heard that she was doing this, I got in touch and said, I really want to talk about this now, because we have a wonderful network of people from really loads of areas across the business, including legal and office management and all our design teams and all of that. But it's quite an informal structure, and I was really keen, and we've had a chat and we're going to chat more, but about how to just, formalize it a little, empower people more. I want the champions to go off and do more in their own areas. So I really want to learn from the BBC and then from all of these other organizations as well. So can't wait for that. For us, at the very beginning when we started out, I did reach out to a lot of companies who I knew were doing this quite well already and chatted. So I had conversations with Google and Monzo and RBS because I was from there, and actually Airbnb and Booking.com, you know, competitors, and still I love that in this area that people are so willing to share their knowledge and their experience. And what came out, actually, the main message through all of those conversations was that changing the culture was the number one aim here. That was how we had to do it. So that is time, you know, that's going to take some time and it's gradual, but it was just really comforting to hear that from everybody, so that I knew that I was on the right track.
There's a risk, isn't there, though, that this all sounds a bit kind of, you know, social value, the right thing to do, a little bit unicorns and rainbows, doesn't it? Occasionally, you know, can we have a quick conversation about this, the people who don't want to interact that way, and actually how do you convince somebody that there is something in it for them? Yeah, you know, so how, you know, this we have this conversation a lot. What's in it for me? Let's say I just don't care about accessibility at all. Let's say I've got absolutely no interest in empowering people with disabilities. Yeah. How do we bring people who are kind of, you know, resisting change? You mentioned earlier, Andy, about security and privacy, you know, the people who just turn things off by default without thinking of the impact that would have on somebody. You know, what's the conversation we need to have in terms of how ready are you to have a conversation with people who are resisting this and having that "what's in it for me" conversation? Andy, could you kick us off on that?
So Andy looks on with a wry smile at this point. We've had those conversations, and can I just say that our technical people and our security people now are the people that turn stuff on.
Brilliant.
And ask us first. I think it is a real hard sell to some people. I'm a 58 tomorrow, birthday tomorrow. I'm a 58-year-old, but I've got Charlotte, who's on my team, who's a young fast streamer. I've got Nick, who was on my team again, who's 23, 24, 25, and they totally get that it's cool, and it is really cool, and it's really exciting. But trying to suggest to somebody along with your day job, we've got just one more thing we'd like you to do, which is accessibility. And I think you've just got to keep banging away with people. And occasionally people just get it. And the thing that's really helped us during COVID, interestingly, wasn't just captions, but when we got what's called speaker attribution in captions. When people could say, hold on, it's Andy Black speaking, or it's Hector speaking. And they just got the idea that could be useful for people, not only that have got a degree of hearing impairment, but people that are homeschooling kids, people that have got English as an additional language, because it's another prompt for learning a language. And it's just occasionally just stuff drops with people. Yep. And there's some things that are built into Office 365 that you and I think are accessibility features. That's utter rubbish. They're just business efficiency things. They're just stuff that makes stuff quicker to do. You know, if you're tired, you're working long hours, and you want to subsume information, what do? You listen to it on a web page using read aloud. Yep. You don't read it because you maybe want to give your eyes a rest. So I think those conversations are difficult, and it's quite interesting how you get yourself at the top of the queue or in the queue for people's priorities. Charlie mentioned about, you know, the charter helps her a great deal. That's fantastic. Heather, it's a business, you know, Heather has totally got it that it's a business imperative. There's a lot of disability money, you know, out there, the purple pound. But I think you've just got to somehow work out a way of getting it into people's mindset. And I think that growth mindset, and I think we haven't cracked it, but I've got some you know, with my directorate and with the operations, I've got some senior managers that have got that growth mindset, that are infected with accessibility being cool and being not only the right thing to do, but just being a business imperative. You've just got to get on with it.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned productivity. You know, we've got to remember that most disability is not disclosed in the workplace. So if we're not proactive about socializing work, you know, accessibility, then we're just losing out on all of that hidden productivity there. Heather, could we just quickly talk about brand perception though? Because, you know, there is something here about we're the cool young new kids on the block kind of idea, and we want to be accessible, you know, almost like at birth of the company. You know, and I also want you to have a think about this industry narrative. You know, I do think sometimes that actually taking a leading position on whichever part of our society you're in, whether you're in, you know, taking a leading position in government, taking a leading position in industry, or taking a leading position in media, Charlie, you know, it's this idea that actually we're ahead of the game because we're doing accessibility. Is that an argument that you're starting to see resonate?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll go to you first, Heather.
Yes, absolutely. We actually just had conversations with the brand and marketing team a couple of weeks ago. A lot's happened in the last couple of weeks about how to have those conversations, because I think now, after working on this for a year, we're starting to see adoption. We're starting to see parts of the product that we can talk about. We know we've got a long way to go, but we're in a good position that we can start sharing the work that we're doing, or start actually talking to our travelers to say that actually, everyone can now use us, hopefully. So it's talking to them in a way that's going to make them, our brand team actually, make them listen and go, oh yeah, we can. But let's talk about it in the same sentence as we talk about inclusion and diversity, sustainability, those cool things. Accessibility is up there with that. And the thing is, it's not going to go away. This is just the momentum is building with accessibility everywhere. Another reason for the coolness is that it's such a great thing to have on your CV, because not everyone does it. It's a real sought after talent and skill here across all disciplines. So if you've got experience in that, you can prove that you can do it. Wonderful.
Well done. Well done for saying that. This is a future skill. When we talk to people about, what are the jobs of the future? And, constantly, this is a conversation politicians have all the time. It's like, how are we moving forward? What will tomorrow's jobs be? Tomorrow's jobs are going to be digital inclusion. Get ready for it, because society is using technology. It's going to be slowed down unless we bring everybody in. So this is exactly right. So we're getting some questions in, and I'm just really conscious that we could go on for another couple of hours. Maybe I'll ping Mark and see if we can grab an extension. But we talked about the importance to measure, but a question has come in is what do you measure to show improvement and accessibility? So Charlie, as you start to build out your program on culture change, measuring culture change is a difficult one. But what are you looking at in terms of either measuring the accessibility, the technical accessibility of things, but then also the buy-in to the agenda?
I think for us, from a technical point of view, and I think a lot of my team would support me in this, it's silence is golden for us. So we have, we've got a way that all the license fee payers can come and complain as much as they want. You can go onto the complaints website. If we're not getting any complaints, that's great for us. You know what I mean? And we listen to every single one that comes in around accessibility. We encourage people to tell us exactly what was going wrong, how they would like us to fix it, or if they've got the solution, or, we deal with that. But the silence for us works perfectly. So, over the period of time, like we were talking about before, is how, some people might not always want to buy into it and are a bit stubborn when it comes to accessibility. And you think, it's delving into why, if they're stubborn about it because they think it's going to take a little bit longer time, then we can prove that actually that's not the case, because you're not having to redesign things 3 or 4 times because it's getting blocked at a certain point. If it's a money thing, we can go at it from a different angle. But for us, it's like over that period of time we were going down from big massive complaints every couple of months to now hardly anything. We deal with something big maybe once a year. So from a technical point of view, that's how we measured that. And from a culture and change point of view, I think that it's just being really open with our champs. So I've got an open door policy in the sense of, tell me what you don't like about the network, or what you think you want to see more about. If you thought of a better solution, come and tell me. I'll do these catch-ups with people and I'll say, just give it to me. Like, tell me all the things that you don't like about something, because then I can do something about it. And so when you see people interacting, or we have a Slack channel that we use, and we eventually will migrate over to Teams because it's more accessible. But the way that we do it at the minute is, we've got almost 300 people on this channel, and everyone's having a conversation. They'll post something and go, I'm trying to create this thing, how do we help? And all these people are kind of diving in, going, I've dealt with that, or I'm changing this at the minute, or that's a problem for me too. So it's seeing that interaction happen. So loudness in one area works and silence in another.
I was just about to say that. I was just saying, what you're actually measuring is you're measuring external silence and internal volume. I love it. That's a great one for people to take away. Heather, from a more kind of UX experience, how are you measuring the progress you're making on the platform? And how accessible you are.
It's such a hot topic for me at the moment. So we're looking into tools to help us measure and track our accessibility score, if you like. We haven't actually confirmed which one we're going to use, but there are some tools out there that do the automated testing, but also guide you through the manual testing elements of it. So allow you to set up an audit of a certain section of your product or whatever, and run that audit and then rerun it on a regular basis. So I would love to do that so that we can start making our teams a bit more accountable for what they're doing. But so it starts, I mean, we have done some audits over the time. We started off actually auditing our design system, which was really interesting. We have a lovely design system called Backpack. We audited that to see where our problems were in terms of our components. And we're gradually, so we've got a score going there. We know how many components had issues, and we're gradually sorting that out. There's also internal measurements that we can do, like the number of squads we've trained, the number of champions we have.
That's what we measure,
all of that stuff. So there's a huge pot of things that you can measure. I'm just trying to work out exactly the best.
And the other thing is, just remember, you've said it's in your mission. You've got the word in your mission. You've got to look at Charlie. She's got her culture change agenda. You're almost getting permission to report this progress upwards as well. And I would really encourage you to make sure that continues to happen. Even if they don't ask for it, send an accessibility progress report up to people, because it just gets it in that this is even a thing, that we are measuring, and that will help you push the agenda forward. We really are up against the clock, and I've got questions flying in now on the chat. So Andy, there's a question that's come in I'd like you to take. If I am not the accessibility or inclusivity expert, am I the right person to be trying to start an accessibility champion network?
I would say absolutely you are. I think
if you're asking the question, you are, right?
yeah. So if you're asking, I think you absolutely are. I'm not. I'm not an accessibility expert. I have an understanding of the space, and I think I have an ability to see the bigger picture, which is one of my traits. But I think it is absolutely. I came in. I've spent a long time working in tech, but I've only been really working in this area for a couple of years. This is my first TechShare Pro. Quietly whispers, so I'm a newbie, and I think and reach out and find your allies. And going back to the question about how do we measure exactly a bit like Charlie does. If people escalate to senior managers, if it's quiet, I'm happy.
Brilliant. Right, we are against the clock. There was a session earlier in the week where people were asked to give their final tweet of the session, so I just want you to give people a takeaway. The question is, how do we continue to amplify accessibility within our own organizations? Charlie, you're nodding, so I'm coming straight to you.
You know what? Have the conversation. Like the person said before, am I the right person? If you're asking that and you're talking about it, have those conversations with people, raise the question, put your hand up in a meeting and go, have we thought about this? It's just about keep going when it comes to talking about accessibility. Keep learning. Nobody's ever an expert. There's always stuff to learn. And everything changes all the time. And as long as you're keeping on that journey, then you'll be fine.
It's that classic. Something needs to be done about this. Okay, you've got the job.
Yeah.
Right, Heather, your tweet.
I'd agree with the talking. So yeah, I'd say get people to hear it, get people to feel it, and get people to do it. Would be mine.
Love it. Fantastic. Andy, last words.
Simple one. Don't ever apologise about promoting accessibility and inclusivity, and just let's do it. Let's get on with it.
Fantastic. Look, I'd love to thank you all. I've enjoyed the rehearsals just as much as I've enjoyed the session. We didn't keep to the script at all, which is always the sign of a good panel discussion. I'm going to hand back to Mark in the studio.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks, Hector. As you say, no script. You could have written a script, as many scripts as you liked, and it still would have come out differently. What you didn't do, which I think you need to do, we need to do, is to mention that Charlie's running a session at 4 o'clock. Because that conversation is never going to stop anyway. We could have given you 2 hours and it would have carried on.
Yeah.
But Charlie is actually running a session specifically to talk to people about Accessibility Champions Network. And that's there so we can begin to look at what's going to happen around that network. And every time somebody's mentioned what they're thinking of doing, they've said, can I join in? Can I be part of it? So that's clearly going to grow quickly. But thank you for that brilliant session, really, really insightful. And I think Heather wins tweet of the day so far. We need to capture that and put it out there. So I'll make sure
that tweet's accessible, right?
Exactly. Thank you. Thanks, Hector.
All right, see you. Bye.
Thank you. So the next session, I'm sure you'll agree, that was fantastic. We're going to move on to a conversation between Rama and Christina. Rama, I think Girawa is coming on. I think Rama's going to be... Hi, Rama. How you doing?
Hi, hello.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm very color coordinated today.
You're
so
doing really
all is
well. Yes, you are. That background is great. Is that the same room I saw you in before?
That's right. It's just a different wall. We went from white to blushing lilac.
It's very nice. Cool. So I'm not really going to get in the way of this and a conversation between you and Christina, but I just wanted to say a huge thank you for being part of this. And you know, on the rehearsal, I know you two have got plenty to chat about. So I'm going to leave that to you and hope you enjoy yourself in your chat with Christina. So can I remind you to do your audio descriptions when you start, just so you can tell people what you look like and who you are. Thank you. I'll leave you to it.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So my name is Rama. I'm the director of the Helen Hamlin Centre for Design at London's Royal College of Art. I am male. I have black hair and brown skin. I am Indian by ancestry, West Indian by descent. And as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm British by birth. I'm sitting in a room with a blushing lilac shirt, which matches the wall behind me, on a grey sofa. And could I hand over to Christina to introduce herself?
Hi, Rama, and hi, viewers. I'm Christina Mallon. I am the head of inclusive design and accessibility at Wunderman Thompson, and Wunderman Thompson is one of the largest advertising agencies in the world. In my free time, I am the Chief Brand Officer of Open Style Lab, and we are an inclusive design lab in New York, and also a part of Inclusively, which is a job hiring platform, kind of a LinkedIn for people with disabilities. And I am a female, I am Caucasian, very light skinned. Right now I am wearing a striped navy and red shirt. And behind me, I have a bookcase of books that I haven't read, but my in-laws have read. And it is in a brown light wood bookcase.
Fantastic. You make me want to come and read your in-laws' books, Christina. That description sounds so wonderful. So I wondered if we might kick off with, two words that often don't sit in the same sentence, accessibility and leadership. And why is that? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I wish there was more, and I wish it wasn't, so few and far between when it comes to leadership, especially at, large organizations. Being a person with a disability, and that, becoming disabled so early on in my career, my arms became disabled probably at my first job ever, after graduating university. And I didn't understand why no one was talking about it when we created 1 out of every 6 ads in the world.
Wow.
So basically, we create culture. And that was really scary for me. And then I started to notice around and talk to our clients if they were topics that they were talking about. And I really started to see the most excitement around accessibility at Microsoft. And and that's where I learned a lot about, leadership and accessibility, and tried to model kind of their maturity model from inclusivity and use it at my organization.
Yeah, I think Microsoft has been at an epicenter for many of us. I remember working with them many years ago when we were setting up the center, and Microsoft, IDEO, the University of Cambridge were real bedfellows when, as designers, we were looking at what do we bring to the accessibility and inclusivity conversation. And the founding director of the center, one of the founding directors, a guy called Roger Coleman, described the term inclusive design in 1994. And the UK government, who I have to say don't get everything right, they got this right in the year 2000. They described it as including the needs of the widest number of people. I mean, that sounds like a wonderful thing, but I'm sure you've had this experience that you walk into a boardroom, you walk into a group of people in a corporate setting, and you mention the words inclusive design and accessibility, and people look at you with a blank stare. It looks like you've just landed from another planet. You know, has this changed? Because, you know, I feel over the last 10, 20 years, I see a change, but it's not quite the groundswell that I'd love to see. So what's your experience of walking into that boardroom setting, and how do you deal with it? Because I know so many people out there, including myself, would love to hear some war stories.
Yeah, I mean, usually when I talk about accessibility, inclusive design, they're thinking about price point accessibility.
Right. Yeah.
And or, you know, just ease of being able to purchase, but in a sense of like location. They usually don't think about inclusive design and accessibility in the sense of, you know, changing abilities of a human. So really, a lot of the times, all my conversations are just, you know, intro into inclusive design and accessibility 101. And I think which is as surprising, you know, as you would think, is that a lot of the times these executives don't realize that they'll be disabled at some point in their lives.
Yeah.
And it shocks them, and they're like, wow, wait, you're right. Nor do they realize that, you know, cognitive disabilities and things like that are also included in disabilities. They just think of someone who uses a wheelchair, or someone like me that has dual arm paralysis. And it's a lot of education. And I think, you know, I do see that other underfunded, underrepresented groups, when they talk about equality and inclusive design, from that, people start to understand it more. And there's a lack of closeness of accessibility to their personal selves, because people don't want to think about any challenges that they might have in their life when it comes to, you know, accessibility and inclusion. So it really is just kind of taking that steps to educate, because, you know, I think people just don't know.
I love that, taking the steps to educate, because sometimes, you know, in the boardroom settings, we've resorted to some clever design trickery, or just the human connection. So we kind of attenuate between the two. The human connection is saying things like we are all, you know, just temporarily able-bodied. So there is, you know, that word tabs, and it just sort of brings people home to the fact that you move across and up and down and inside out of a spectrum of ability. And if we look at neurodiversity, there is something that's equivalent to, you know, an early to mid-level cognitive impairment that I guarantee you we've all had in the last 48 hours, and it's called stress. You know, I was looking for my glasses this morning and I was wearing them. So, you know, so that kind of connection of bringing it home and thinking of not just designing for people or inflicting a product or an idea or a piece of advertising on people, but seeing that as part of a continuum is really important. You know, so we talk about designing for ability, not disability, and it's not just disability, it's an inability. It's a designed world that actually makes it unable for people to use. And that was the great insight of Helen Hamlin, who is our patron. She's alive and well, 86 years young. She's not a Victorian heiress, but her realization years ago was design needs to do more. So the final thing in the boardroom setting is, I remember once very early on in my career, we were talking to a supermarket about packaging, and that, you know, people with a range of abilities couldn't open, you know, their easy peel bacon packaging. And we just got a group of people, 8 people in the room, and asked them to open it. And I remember our signature pitch was one slide. It was one video, and it was of Frank, aged 76, with a little bit of arthritis, but not a lot. And he spends 12 minutes trying to open their packaging. And at that point, the board turned around and said, please turn off this video. It's painful to watch. And we realize what's even more painful is that we need to accept that we haven't got it right. So, you know, that idea of education is really important. So I just wondered if you did have some stories of specifics of how you've persuaded, how you've challenged, how you've progressed.
Yeah, so I really kind of have this three-prong approach, which is really personal stories and show that, you know, there are people with disabilities that are right in front of your face, and they are a huge community. And then I talk about, you know, the stats when it comes to them as a consumer. I mean, the disability community has $8 trillion of disposable income. And then comparing that, it's, you know, it's similar to the disposable income of China. So when I'm able to compare and show that, they start to understand. And then, you know, I drop that legal compliance bomb on them, especially in the United States when it comes to digital accessibility. So it's really looking at kind of what are the roles of all the executives and kind of showing that, okay, give them 3 reasons why it might affect their role. If you're the, you know, the head counsel of legal, you're the CFO, or you're the chief brand officer. And I've been able to really, you know, be successful by providing kind of those 3 reasons to why. And, you know, what's been really great is coming into my role at Wunderman Thompson and WPP. I feel lucky that my executives really championing this, and they've kind of opened the door to other executives. So I haven't found much resistance when going to the boardroom from other organizations. I think what happens is that a lot of the times they think it's very niche, and I try to explain it's not. And it's really just a lot of pushing, and always saying you need to do this. This is not just moral, ethical. This is the right business thing to do. But it does take a lot of conversations. And I think, you know, but I've been successful and I've been able to have great partners like Unilever and Shell and things like that. But they're definitely slower to get people to realize.
Yeah. And one of, you know, thinking about the leadership of this space and building on what you're saying, you know, when people hear accessibility or inclusion, quite often it is that bottom line, it's a fiscal approach, a fiscal reason. But, you know, there's 2 words in inclusive design, for instance, and one is design. And design is supposed to be an exciting, enabling, conscious activity. And, you know, how do we get people excited about this? You know, I often think that a CEO stands for a chief executive officer, or sometimes it's a chief execution officer. How do we turn people who are leading an organization into a CEO, meaning a chief excitement officer about this?
A lot of the times what I think is so great just being at Wunderman Thompson is we're good storytellers. And I think that great stories around accessibility and inclusive design get them very excited. So I've made sure to arm myself with really great case studies to show kind of the impact that investing in inclusive design and accessibility has on an organization. One example is Tommy Hilfiger. We helped them launch the inclusive design experience within the launch of their adaptive clothing line brand. And adaptive clothing, if I know, Rama, you know, but in case our viewers don't know, is clothing with easier access points. So why are buttons just these plastic buttons? Why can't buttons just be magnets? Why aren't we looking at better design? Yeah. And just telling those stories about these kind of aha moments that people have when they're rethinking why things are designed and challenging that and telling that via storytelling is so important. I think that's where I've been able to get excitement around from CEOs and CMOs to kind of really pay so that they're bringing in the community to co-collaborate, because that's one thing that I think is so important in design is co-design. And that's not just with people with disabilities. If that's with everyone, if you're trying to design something, it can't just be, your personal beliefs or your personal, preferences. It needs to be with, the impact of and feelings of everybody.
That's so true. And the feelings of people themselves is incredibly important. The center celebrates, the center I have the privilege and honor of leading, the Helen Hamlin Center. It celebrates 30 years next year. But, rather like a Marvel comic movie, we have an inception, an origin story. And it really came from, a series of single moments, but one of them was really powerful. It's not my story, so I hope I don't misquote it. But again, Roger Coleman, who founded the center, he said, and we're talking about 35 years ago, he realized one of the seminal moments of changing his attitudes around, disability from kind of, execution of purpose to, an excitement around possibility, was when he had a friend of his who in her 20s, I think she developed MS. And the council was looking at putting her in a home, a care home for older people. But, this girl, Rachel, was a very vibrant, active. She was a 20-something-year-old woman. And, what the friends got together and decided to refit her flat so the council could approve it and she could stay there. And this was way before the days of accessibility standards or any sort of building regulations that meaningfully spoke to this. So they spent the whole day putting together everything and making sure it was functional, and everyone took over. And Rachel was sitting there sort of looking at them, and they suddenly realized they need to ask her what she wanted. So they turned around and said, "What do you want?" And she said these immortal words that are sort of, pressed on my brain. She said, "I want to make the neighbors jealous." And that was a light bulb moment. And I've had many, many similar light bulb moments where people with a range of abilities talk beyond a condition, beyond a wheelchair, beyond the accoutrements of life that shows a reduced ability, and talk about humanity. So I just wondered if we can speak a little bit of how do we bring humanity again into these decision points, because you spoke about stories and I've spoken about videos, but what else can we do as individuals, both within the community of inclusive design and accessibility and outside of that, and what can we learn from other movements that may be going on, whether that's Black Lives Matters or something like that. There's a lot to discuss there, and I'm putting it all into one sentence there, Christina.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everybody deserves the right to express themselves. That is a human right, I believe. So a lot of the times, as we talked about the woman with MS, I mean, doesn't she deserve a beautiful home that reflects her personal style? She does. And I think it's coming back to that innate need and desire and right to express yourself, and kind of everybody has that. So it's really kind of telling everyone, if you deserve that, so does a person with disability. Just giving them something that is practical, I guess you could say, but not making it beautiful, that doesn't help with compliance. So how I've also done that is, and we try to do this in Open Style Lab, the nonprofit that I'm a part of for inclusive design, is really do studies to understand how compliance and usage increases with style. because I think a lot of the times when I talk to senior leaders, they say, oh, well, we have this charity, they give money to this disability fund, that's it. But what was really interesting when I joined Inclusively, which is the disability hiring network, was that when I talked to a lot of people, they said that not having the right clothing was one of the reasons why they didn't want to work. They didn't feel like they could be themselves.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting people to understand that all of the same, insecurities or reasons why you like something, they're all the same no matter what for people with disabilities and people without disabilities. And I think that's really key, because a lot of the times we've been othered. We're like, well, as long as they have their basic needs, they're fine. You don't need to worry about, what you're wearing as long as you have that job. But that's not true. And that's not true for anybody. And that's really important. And when I look a lot with my husband's in the real estate business, and we talk about equitable housing. Why does someone, of lower income can only live in this section of the neighborhood, or their, subsidized housing is run down? They don't deserve that either. And I think it's just going back to everybody has very similar desires, needs, and wants, and everyone deserves that. And I think, I took that cue off of really seeing how other markets are approaching that, and specifically in real estate, to understand that everybody just wants equity, and really look to make sure that everyone can express themselves with style and have preference and choice. Because we have technology now, we're in an economy where we can do that. And I think that's really, really important of how I've looked at kind of other industries and other movements to understand, okay, how do we ensure that we have equity in, inclusive design? Because really only in, when I've experienced in the United States, it's just from physical spaces, and then digital spaces are starting to be required to be accessible. But why aren't there design kind of rules and formulas for fashion or for CPG? There is just really no kind of toolkit or rule book that says this is how, we provide equity through design.
I think if I had my Harry Potter wand, the one sector that I would love to do a project with immediately is the fashion industry, because I feel, products, services, built environment, to greater or lesser degree, listen to an inclusive approach, or at least there's more pathways and projects and processes. But fashion is that sort of magic. It's the thing I'd love to be Harry Potter with. I even have the glasses. So just to drop down in the last sort of 5-6 minutes into some specificities around leadership, a real interest of mine is something called creative leadership, which was built from an insight that we need more creatives in leadership position, but we also need leaders who are creative. And it's homegrown from inclusive design. It's homegrown from the 100+ projects that I've personally led, the 300 projects of the center, working across public and private sector. And the three values of it are empathy, clarity, and creativity. Empathy, I felt I learned as a human being. Creativity as a designer, and the importance of clarity I learned from an ex-girlfriend. And we've all had that relationship where you wonder what's going on. Clarity was a surprising one, because, for me, it really plays out in when we look at accessibility, inclusivity, and leadership. Because there's one of the issues of clarity that came up for me is leadership for me isn't just someone broadcasting from a podium. It starts with yourself. And how can we enable people, just human beings, as you're saying, people with a range of ability? What ties us all together is we're human, and we all live, as far as I know, on this gorgeous little planet of ours. The same sun rises and sets on all of us every day, but that day can be radically different depending on ability. So how can we give a greater clarity of purpose, of understanding that is self-generated? And whilst you're thinking of that, I'll just give a very quick example. One thing that we started using in our rhetoric to designers and design and creatives is to say people with a range of ability are like extreme users, they're lead users. So it's the lead user principle, you know, get a racing driver to test your car, an athlete to test your shoe. And actually in the everyday life, people with a range of abilities will give you so much information. And, you know, this was something that I first learned when we were redesigning Heathrow Terminal 5 and looking at the wayfinding. Instead of the 50 business users that they gave us, we had an 8-year-old girl, a Japanese tourist who didn't speak English, a visually impaired gentleman, and a couple in their 80s who had the multiple minor impairments of aging but couldn't lift their own suitcases. So that for me was a real point of clarity, that actually all of us with a range of abilities can drive innovation, can extend innovation. So I just wondered if you had any other points of clarity from your own experience that you could share.
Yeah, so we kind of do the same method at Wunderman Thompson when it comes to CX. What we need to try to push people is that they need to do, as I said before, the co-collaboration with the extreme users. So I would say that that has probably been one of my most successful kind of, I don't know, efforts, is that getting, you know, the people that are in charge of experience to really, really look at, let's use the extreme users. We were working with Walmart to understand kind of how do people experience Walmart going in the store? What are the pain points? And I remember, you know, having my team talk about the organization of the fridges and the freezers there, and how do they get actually food out of it. And they said, well, we're going to do the most extreme case. Let's say if you're a little person, how do you actually get the thing that's on the top of the freezer? And, you know, I think that was really, you know, insightful for the Walmart team and very helpful for that redesign to really thinking of what are the extreme cases. Another example from that project was looking at the receipt. Why are receipts, like physical receipts that you get, so long and have so much jargon and writing down on it? It's so confusing. You just want to see, you know, what you were charged for, and that is it. And then really understanding kind of the cognitive load. And I think they really started to see that, understanding it when I talked to them about, oh, but like, what if you, you know, had severe, you know, cognitive disabilities? How would you be able to return something at Walmart? And I think that led to, you know, some really excitement, you know, redevelopments of the different experience at Walmart. And I totally agree, getting the, you know, extreme cases, I guess you could say, always lead to innovation. We have so many, you know, examples that say the touchscreen, curb cuts,
remote controls,
yes,
automatic doors.
Just makes life better. And I think people need to realize, and, you know, I guess it's our jobs to remind them that all of these great, you know, inventions are because of thinking about extreme cases.
Yeah. And I think that is almost a beautiful point to wrap up on. We've got a minute left, but so I don't know if there's any final sentence that you would like to say. Imagine if you were speaking to all of us who are leaders, and by that I mean everyone on the planet. So established leaders, emerging leaders, and people like me who were never built to be in a leadership position when I was at school. And I think that's the majority of us. So speaking to the leaders on this planet with a range of abilities, is there any final words you'd like to say? Or shall I have something to say as well. I could go first.
Rama, you go, because I've done so much talking and I would love to hear more from you.
So We're so empathic because I feel like I've done most of the talking. So that's why we're in inclusive design. But I would love to pick up on something that you talked about, we're all human. And I'd love to say to all of us, we need to change the language and stop talking about disability in terms of a condition. It's about the person. And we need to stop talking about users and consumers, because users use and consumers consume. We need to start talking about people. So the little phrase I always say is users use, consumers consume, but people live. And that's people of all ages, abilities, needs, genders, races, cultures, and any of the other qualifiers that make us human, that make us diverse and make this planet a potentially wonderful place to be. So that's
I love that. I need to get that like framed right on my desk. So whenever I'm just like frustrated, I see that and I think of your face and I'm like, okay, life is good. We're gonna get this done.
Wonderful. No, thank you so much, Christina. And I won't promise my face, but I will promise that quote. And it's absolutely wonderful to be sharing and hearing thoughts and going on a journey of words with you.
Oh, you also, and I'm hoping, we get to actually meet in person.
Yes.
When coronavirus is over.
Yes, absolutely. The Zoom screen only does so much justice. But
it's not enough energy for me.
Yeah, no, exactly. So we are drawing a line there, and can we hand back to the studio?
Hey, Rama. Hey, Christina. It's Mark here. I wanted to butt in rather than leave you. And that was fantastic. Honestly, it was just so inspiring. I think the storytelling stuff that you're catching hold of there is the core of what we need to do. I'm based on that. I just had one question for each of you. If you're, I'm thinking about taking that tip. Get your stories straight. Where do you sort of send people? What skills do you share with people in your teams around you, the students you work with, Rama? Where do I find how to tell those stories? I think it's something that we all need to learn all the time, and there are lots of places we acquire that skill. But where would you, if I was new in your team, and it said, look, I'm really struggling to tell these stories. I get the idea of what you're doing. Where can I go and learn that, do you think?
Wow, it's a great question, Mark. I mean, we have resources online, there's websites and things we can share, like designingwithpeople.rca.ac.uk, innovatingwithpeople.net. But the very simple thing where you start learning is from within. So the first thing we say to people is you are just sharing a conversation, whether you're doing research, whether you are pitching, you're looking for the, 2 points of connection. So one is a connection on the content, make sure that you are actually connecting to do a project or whatever it is, the focus. But the second thing is people will interact and link with people that they like, they appreciate, and that they connect with. So those are really the only two things that we talk about when we pitch inclusive design, or when we try and enact inclusive design. It comes back to human connection.
Yeah.
But it makes me think, Mark, that this year during lockdown, I've been thinking a lot about this, but there is work to be done on that, on the leadership in inclusivity and all the tools that need to sit around it.
Yeah, and Christina, you work in an advertising agency. That's your trade. I'm guessing that gives you a sort of an instinct for how to tell these stories well. What do you think it is particularly? I like what Ram was saying there about connecting with people. How do you train up a good storyteller, and particularly in terms of the advertising industry? What's the tips and tricks of the trade that I could learn?
Yeah, so I mean, the one thing is keep it short and simple and sweet and relatable. And I think what I try to do when I am talking to executives and trying to get them and get that buy-in is I show a few videos of stories of associates of mine that have disabilities, and they can just relate to them. And they talk about, the small challenges that they have in everyday life that company can solve. Because I think a lot of the times leadership, they feel like you show them these stories and they have no control over it. So you have to give them these stories, but with practical solutions that they can make as a leader, because they want to be in control. They want to be able to fix it. So I keep them short and sweet and relatable, and, at the end, provide an action that leader can take to fix that issue, so that they have a sense of ownership is very important, because you want that leader to walk out and say, I can actually do that. I have control of that, and I can, give back and fix that. And that's how I've been successful in storytelling, is really letting those people tell their own stories. When we shot Tommy Hilfiger, there was no script. When we shot that commercial, we said, just tell us your stories. And then we were able to kind of put them all together into, a 60-second video. So kind of letting them lead, because their personal stories, I think, are the most impactful.
Great, thank you. Well, you've mentioned that several times, putting people in the middle of the stories is fantastic. So thank you so much. Today's all about inspiring the people who are already out there trying to do stuff, and you've done that in spades. So thank you, Rama. Thank you, Christina. And like you say, Christina, hopefully next time around we'll be sitting together and buzzing off that energy. I mean, I've got so much off of this morning anyway, but I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye. So the next session starts at 1 o'clock, and so we'll be back with you then. There is actually, I'm just thinking about this, what we've been talking about, storytelling. There's a short reel of videos that we're showing that Microsoft shared with us, which are very, very brief examples of accessibility features that were shared by a team within Microsoft, not the accessibility team, people within another team, I think the Modern Workplace team, which we'll play out as soon as this session finishes. But it's a brilliant example of some of the really simple things that get the message across is, oh look, you can do this and it makes this happen, and that's a good thing at the end of it. But all the things this morning that we've learned, I think, about leadership, about taking on this sort of evangelist role, building allies, finding champions. I hope you found it as inspiring as I have, and look forward to catching up with you sometime during the day. Take care.
Hello everyone, my name is Cassandra Marrero, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my favorite experience in Microsoft Teams. I spend most of my days in meetings, and to make the most of those meetings, I like to be able to achieve three things. The first thing, I like to keep the discussion focused. Second thing, I like to be able to have my say without interrupting others. And the last thing, I like to be able to go back to the discussion so that I can then check on my call to actions. So how do I do that? Super simple. Let me show you. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the background effect so that I can actually block the visual noise. So that's as simple as that. The next thing that I'm going to do is then hit on record so that I can actually watch it later. And lastly, let us not forget that I can raise my hand at any point and have my voice heard. And that's why I love Microsoft Teams meetings.
Hi everyone, I'm Dan, and I just want to share with you a few new features we've got in Word to help with spell checking and actually getting things done quickly. So the first one is the dictate feature that we have here in the ribbon. I'm able to talk in a language of my choice, typically English, and it will translate automatically for me on the screen, which is really handy. We also have a great app called Editor, which is the evolution of our spell checker app. And in here you can see it's giving me coaching around spelling and grammar in the languages that I've got set up in my document. So it's really handy to get some insight into what those words actually mean, as well as being able to get the word to be read out loud to me. So I hope that helps. Thanks for listening.
Hi, my name's Elliot, and I'm going to show you today how to enable the accessibility prompt across Outlook. To do this, click on the cog icon in the top right corner to open up the settings pane, and then you want to go to the bottom and click on View All Outlook Settings. From here, select General and then Accessibility, And from beneath it, you'll see an option with a tick box that says Ask Senders to send content that's accessible. This will enable a prompt in the Outlook web app as well as your desktop app to make sure that everyone who sends you mails and messages in the future will be sending accessible and inclusive messages because they would have checked them with the accessibility checker. Go enable this today. It's a fantastic feature to make your organization more inclusive.
Hi, my name is Emma Ledger, and today I'm going to be talking about quiet hours in Microsoft Teams. I'm sure I'm not alone with the recent change to remote working in finding it challenging to create boundaries between work and home life. To use quiet hours, we navigate to the settings pane, go to notifications and go to quiet hours. I can then select to switch on or off my quiet hours from particular periods of time up to particular days of the week. This is going to help me to support mindfulness and mental health and minimize distractions out of hours.
Hi, my name is Fernando and I want to show you a simple trick in Outlook to automatically give you and everyone else at work a bit of a breather between calls and hopefully help with your mental well-being. There's a growing number of us right now who are adapting to remote working, and our calendars tend to easily get filled up with back-to-back meetings, so it's very important that we remember to take breaks and clear our heads before jumping straight into the next call. Go to your Outlook calendar options, find the End Appointments and Meetings Early menu and mark the checkbox. You can then use the drop-downs to select the number of minutes that you want to take out of meetings. And after that, whenever you schedule a meeting, those minutes will be automatically discounted. So go on, use it, you'll thank yourself and so will everyone else.
Hi, I'm Hector Minto from the Corporate Responsibility team here at Microsoft. I'm going to show you Reading on Magnify, a brand new feature available in Windows 10. Whenever you're magnified, Windows Plus, in the Windows environment, you can click on any text and choose Reading. So you'll see here, we have a wordy document. Control, Alt, and click on the text.
In consideration of the matters described above and of the mutual benefits and obligation.
Invokes reading absolutely anywhere within the Windows environment, including places like the Notes tab in PowerPoint. So this is not specific to documents. This will work absolutely anywhere.
Use your PC without a display.
This really powers up the magnifier feature in Windows, adding read out loud anywhere within the environment. Thanks so much.
My name is Joanna, and I'm going to show you the coolest feature in PowerPoint. Design Ideas uses AI to suggest a template for your slide, which many people might think that it's all about making those slides look nice, but it was actually originally built as an accessibility feature for those people who had any movement impairment. You can go and start using the feature today by opening your PowerPoint and select the Design Ideas button. This will come up with certain suggestions for my slide, and I will be able to pick the one that I think that is most appropriate. It also works with text in a similar way that works with pictures, suggesting me templates for my slide. And voila, it's that easy to help you make your slides look nice, clean, by using Design Ideas in PowerPoint.
Hi, my name is Jack, and I'm going to show you how you can use themes on Microsoft Teams. When you click on your profile icon, you can also click on Settings. This will show you 3 different themes. Default, which is a light view, dark, and high contrast. These themes are particularly useful for people with vision impairment, so hopefully you can share this with a friend today.
Hi, I'm Jo, and I'm going to show you live captioning in Microsoft Teams. If you go to the top right-hand side of your Teams screen and click the More Actions button, scroll down to the bottom, you'll see Turn on Live Captions. Give it a couple of seconds, and you should see live captions appear at the bottom of your screen. This feature can help you have more inclusive meetings. So whether you're deaf or you've got hearing impairment, or maybe English isn't your first language, you also may be in situations where you can't hear the meeting very well, so maybe you're in a very loud location. We hope you find this feature useful.
Hi, my name's Lara, and today I'd like to tell you about Dynamic Lock. So Dynamic Lock enables you to connect your phone via Bluetooth to your PC, so that when you walk away from your PC, it will automatically lock. To do this, hit the Windows key, type in Dynamic Lock, and it will open up. And if you click on Dynamic Lock, just here, you'll see that it will connect to your device, and you should be all good to go.
Hi, I'm Sergio Carrillo, a partner technology strategist working with Microsoft in the UK. I ended up using Surface and Pen Input to help me. That's my true story. In reality, using Surface and its Pen Input helps reducing stress on the forearm, which may otherwise be caused by long hours of typing or not even using a vertical mouse. When in meetings, it actually helps with taking notes faster, more securely, and helping to memorize the most. And in the end, there's a piece of magic you can do to convert those pieces of text you have written into real text you can paste in the document. How good is that? I hope it helps you somehow and you take some learnings from this.
Hi, I'm Stuart, and today I want to talk to you about your mental health and the relation with sleep. So we know that blue light that we get back from our devices impacts the production of melatonin, which stops us feeling sleepy. But did you know that using Windows 10, you can use a feature called Night Light to give your screen a warm glow, reduce the blue light, and help you fall asleep? So let's have a look at that. So all I need to do is hit Windows and start typing Night Light, and I will get to this screen. Now I can turn it manually on and off myself by using this button, or there's a switch here to allow me to schedule the night light. I can specify the hours manually, so here I've got from 4 PM to 7, or I can use this option here to synchronize it with sunset and sunrise, giving my screen a nice warm glow and helping me sleep a little bit easier.